I'm 44 and I've known for years that my husband cheats on me. I'm saying that plainly because I don't want to pretend I just found out or that I'm confused about what's happening. I know, I've known, I've stayed. I grew up with a single mom who worked nights at a roadside motel. I remember the smell of industrial cleaner on her clothes and the way she'd heat up canned soup at 10 p.m. before leaving for her shift. I learned early that money is quiet security. It's the difference between sleeping and staring at the ceiling. At 18, I married my high school boyfriend. He was 23 then. We thought we were building something steady. He worked at a manufacturing plant. I worked at a department store cosmetics counter. We budgeted carefully. We didn't travel or eat out much, but it felt solid. Year 7, the plant closed. He tried to act fine about it at first. Then he started staying up late, scrolling job listings, interviews out of town. He'd come back irritated, distant. We fought about small things. He'd say I didn't understand pressure. I'd say we needed to tighten spending. We stopped sleeping in the same bed because he said he couldn't sleep. Then he came home from one of those interviews and told me he'd slept with someone. He said he felt like a failure. Said the interview went badly. Said he was depressed and that we'd been pushing each other away. I told him to pack a bag. Marie was my maid of honor at that wedding. She's known me since we were teenagers. When I called her, I was shaking so badly I could barely get words out. She was furious on my behalf. Then when I mentioned he wanted to talk, that he'd started therapy, that he said he was working on himself, she softened. She suggested I at least listen. That suggestion made me feel betrayed. I had drawn a line in my mind and I wasn't going to blur it. I divorced him. I worked extra shifts. I moved into a smaller place. I filed paperwork at night while my daughter slept. It was hard. I won't romanticize that year. I remember crying in the stockroom at work because daycare costs went up. I remember my mom pressing a folded 20 into my hand and me pretending not to notice her hands were shaking. A year later, I met my current husband. He was older, confident, already running his own business. He talked about expansion, investments, scaling. It felt like stability in a different form. He wasn't fragile. He didn't need reassurance every 5 minutes. When we married, his company took off in a way neither of us expected. He retired my mom, paid off her condo. When I mentioned once that I'd always wanted to open a boutique instead of selling other brands, he funded it without hesitation. I'm not naive about how that sounds. The first time I realized he'd cheated, it was a charge on a card for a hotel suite in a city he said he'd only be in for meetings. I confronted him. He admitted it quickly, said it was meaningless, said he gets restless and sometimes makes stupid choices. He apologized, bought me jewelry the next day, acted attentive for weeks. It happened again, different city, different story. The third time I confronted him, he asked me if I wanted to end the marriage over something that didn't touch home. He mentioned divorce casually, like discussing taxes. That word hit differently than it had years before. I'd worked hard to rebuild. We have a prenup that protects his future earnings. I signed it knowing what it said. If we split, I wouldn't be destitute, but I wouldn't be living the life I built either. My boutique exists because of his capital. My mom's retirement depends on his generosity. After that argument, something shifted. There wasn't a sit-down conversation where we defined terms. It was more like a quiet understanding. If he was going to step out, he would keep it discreet. We still have an active Essex life. We host dinners. We take trips. He shows up for my daughter's milestones. On paper, we look fine. In my friend group, I'm not alone in this arrangement. It's just unspoken. Marie works in the hotel industry. She started making comments months ago, asking about my husband's travel schedule, mentioning certain properties by name. I brushed it off. Last week we were at drinks with another friend from Santa Barbara. The conversation drifted. Marie brought up loyalty in marriage out of nowhere. Then she mentioned my husband's name. I tried to redirect. I said we were out to relax. She kept going. She said she'd seen booking patterns, that she knew which hotel he preferred. She said she knew who one of the women was. I felt heat in my face. I told her to stop. She didn't. Our other friend looked uncomfortable. Marie started listing dates, cities, how often it's happened. She said at least my ex confessed and that this was worse. When the other friend finally left, it was just the two of us sitting there with half-finished drinks, and I could feel my hands shaking under the table. And that's when I brought up something I'd never said out loud before. I told her I knew. I told her I've known for years. I said we have an understanding, that I'm not clueless, that I made a decision. I reminded her that when my first husband cheated, she suggested I hear him out. I said now she was acting like I had no agency at all. She said this was different. She said my ex was spiraling and confessed. She said my current husband has built a pattern and I'm helping him keep it polished. I told her she doesn't see my daily life. She doesn't see the stability, the college fund fully paid, my mom gardening instead of working night shifts, the boutique employing 3 women who rely on that paycheck. She said money isn't dignity. That hit. I don't even know why. Maybe because it implied I traded something essential. I asked her what she wanted from me. A divorce announcement, a public breakdown. I said I'm not interested in tearing down my home because she feels morally uncomfortable. She said she feels uncomfortable watching me shrink. I asked her what exactly she thinks shrinking looks like. Running a business, hosting charity events, building a network. I told her I'm not sitting at home waiting for him. She said I sound rehearsed. That's when I told her I didn't want her around me anymore. I said if she couldn't respect my choices, then we were done. I paid the tab and left. She's called 3 times since then. Sent one text saying she's worried about me. I haven't responded. What's bothering me isn't just the confrontation. It's what she brought up about patterns. There have been moments, small, quiet ones, like last spring when my husband extended a business trip and missed my daughter's recital. He sent flowers to her dressing room. She smiled for the photos, played her part perfectly. But later she asked me why he was starting to turn into her biological father and whether she had done something wrong. Or when one of his assistants quit abruptly and there were whispers I chose not to chase down. Or the night he left his phone on the kitchen island and a notification popped up with a name I didn't recognize. I turned the screen face down and went upstairs without opening it. I tell myself these are contained, that our home life remains intact, but Marie standing there listing dates made it feel less contained and more like something everyone can map out except me. After that night, I watched my husband more closely, not in an investigative way, just noticing. He was attentive. Asked about a new supplier for the boutique, booked a weekend trip for us next month, sat with my mom and discussed her garden irrigation system like he had all the time in the world. It's not like he's distant. That's what complicates it. A few days ago, he mentioned he might need to travel again soon. I felt that old tightening in my chest, but I didn't comment. He kissed my forehead and kept talking about logistics. I used to be someone who drew a hard line. I walked away from my first marriage with nothing lined up because I believed I deserved loyalty without compromise. Now I measure risk differently. I calculate impact. I weigh what gets preserved against what gets sacrificed. Marie sees that as surrender. I see it as choosing the version of life I can live with. But I can't ignore that when she said I'm modeling this for my daughter, I felt defensive instead of confident. My daughter is 21. She's smart. She notices more than I say. She's made a few comments about how business marriages work in certain circles. I laughed them off at the time. I don't know if she's observing me and adjusting her expectations of relationships accordingly. I also don't know if cutting off Marie is about protecting my peace or protecting the agreement I have with my husband from outside pressure. There's history there, too. Marie has always been blunt. In college, she once told me I was settling for my first husband because I was afraid to be alone. I stopped talking to her for months after that. Eventually, I let it go because she had stood by me through some of the roughest phases of my life. Part of me wonders if she sees something I refuse to name. Another part of me resents that she brought it up publicly. If she truly cared, she could have talked to me privately instead of listing details in front of someone else. That felt less like concern and more like exposing me. I haven't told my husband about the confrontation. I'm not sure why. Maybe I don't want him to know that the discretion slipped. Maybe I don't want him to reassure me and make it all feel tidy again. I've built a life that looks secure. It feels secure most days. I don't wake up anxious. I don't feel unloved in the daily sense. I feel chosen in public and prioritized in practical ways. But I also know there are other women in hotel rooms with him. I decided I could live with that trade-off. Marie decided she couldn't watch it. Now I'm without a friend I've had since I was a teenager. I'm trying to figure out if I ended that friendship because she crossed a line by airing private information in front of someone else, or because she forced me to say out loud something I prefer to keep unspoken. Was I wrong to cut her off? And if I wasn't wrong, how do I know I'm not just protecting a version of my life that depends on staying quiet? Follow-up. I ended up telling him about Marie. I didn't plan to. It came out during dinner a few nights after I stopped answering her calls. He asked why I seemed distracted. I said I'd run into some unnecessary drama. He pressed. I told him she'd brought up his travel patterns in front of someone else. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look embarrassed either. He just leaned back and asked what exactly she said. I repeated it. The hotels. The name she mentioned. The tone. He nodded slowly and said he'd handle it. A week later, Marie texted me something different from the missed calls. She wrote that a regional manager she's worked with for years suddenly stopped responding to her, that a promotion she'd been informally told was coming was under review. She asked if I'd spoken to my husband. I didn't answer her. I asked him that night if he'd said anything to anyone. He said only that he clarified a few misunderstandings about discretion and professionalism. He said he protects his household. I understood what that meant. For the first time, I felt like I'd used him as leverage without saying the word. 2 days after that, my daughter called me. She asked if she could come by the boutique before closing. She didn't sit. She stayed standing near the counter and said Marie reached out to her, said she didn't want secrets shaping her expectations of marriage. She didn't give details, just concerns. I felt anger rise before I could filter it. I said Marie had crossed a line, that adult friendships are complicated and sometimes people project their issues. My daughter listened quietly. Then she asked, "Is he faithful?" I didn't answer directly. I said marriage is layered, that not everything is simple, that stability matters. She looked at me in a way I haven't seen before, not shocked, not upset, just measuring. She said, "I just need to know what you think is normal." That stayed with me longer than Marie's confrontation. 3 days later, one of the women, not the one Marie named, a different one. She messaged me on Instagram from a private account. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won. She said she believed I was aware and consenting, that he told her we had an understanding. She said she didn't want to participate if she was being lied to. I didn't respond. I showed it to him that night. He seemed annoyed. He said some people misinterpret proximity, that he never claimed consent, that women sometimes fill in blanks to justify their choices. I asked if he told her I knew. He paused, then said he might have implied I wasn't the jealous type. That wording made something shift in me, not outrage, more like clarity. My silence isn't private, it's part of his appeal. Last weekend, we attended a fundraiser. He stayed close to me most of the night, hand on my back, introducing me to people as the reason his life works. At one point, I stepped away to greet someone and saw him across the room speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. The interaction was brief, polished, too polished. Later, I noticed a photo from the event online. Someone tagged him at a lunch earlier that week. The same woman, midday. No attempt to obscure it. When I mentioned it lightly, he said it was business. Then he added, almost casually, that if I preferred to live under constant suspicion, we should reconsider what we're doing. There it was again, divorce placed on the table. I realized something uncomfortable. The arrangement used to feel like my decision. Now it feels like a test I have to keep passing. Meanwhile, Marie texted my daughter again. My daughter showed me this time. Marie wrote that she was worried I was being isolated. That financial comfort can blur lines. I wanted to call Marie and tear into her. Instead, I messaged saying she needed to stop contacting my family. I haven't sent it yet. What unsettles me isn't the affairs anymore. It's how easily everything shifts when I speak. I told him about her and her career tilted. I stay silent and he frames it as personality. I question him and divorce becomes a discussion point. I chose this arrangement believing I was protecting stability. Now I'm not sure who it protects. Do I confront him harder and risk proving his point that I can't handle the reality? Do I cut Marie off completely and tell my daughter she's overstepping? Or do I admit that this isn't as contained as I convinced myself it was? A continuation. I handled it badly. That's probably the cleanest way to start. After my daughter left my boutique that day, after she asked me what I think is normal, things didn't settle. They got sharper. She came over for dinner a week later. My husband was traveling. It was just the two of us. I thought without him there we could talk calmly. I told myself I would explain things better. Instead, I interrogated her. I asked how often she'd been speaking to Marie. I asked what exactly Marie said. I asked whether she thought I was naive. She kept her composure longer than I expected. Then she said she doesn't think I'm naive. She thinks I'm afraid to lose my lifestyle. I said she has no idea what she is talking about. I reminded her where I grew up. I reminded her that her grandmother doesn't work nights anymore. I said security isn't shallow. She said security shouldn't cost self-respect. That phrase again, different mouth. I asked her if she thought I had no self-respect. She hesitated. That hesitation was worse than a yes. We went in circles. She finally said she doesn't want to bring a partner home one day and have me tell her compromise is maturity. She said she's been watching how I handle things for years. That's when I lost patience. I told her she's 21 and has no concept of long-term reality. I told her relationships aren't fairy tales and that adults make calculations. I said Marie has filled her head with half-truths. She stood up. She said Marie didn't need to fill anything in because she can see it. She left without finishing her wine. That night I decided I was done being passive about all of this. The next morning I messaged the woman who had contacted me, the one who said she believed I consented. I kept it brief. I told her there is no consent. I told her whatever understanding she thinks exists is between her and him, not me. And I told her I would prefer she remove herself from my marriage. She read it within minutes. Then she responded with a screenshot. It was a message from him, months old. He wrote that I'm aware of how things work and that jealousy isn't my temperament. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I did something else. I contacted an attorney of my own, not the firm that handled our prenup, a separate one recommended by a woman I know from a board I sit on. I framed it as a routine review, asset mapping, contingency planning. I told myself this wasn't about divorce, it was about information. The attorney requested documents, trust structures, corporate holdings, real estate titles. It became clear very quickly that while I am comfortable, much of what feels shared is technically insulated, not hidden, just layered. I signed nothing, I filed nothing, but I now know more than I did before. That knowledge didn't calm me. A few nights later, we attended another industry dinner. I had already seen the tagged lunch photo with him and that woman. He called it business. Fine. At dinner, someone joked about travel perks and loyalty points. I smiled and said, yes, some people are very loyal to certain hotels. It was light, but it landed. He looked at me for a second too long. In the car afterward, he asked what that was supposed to mean. I said nothing, just a joke. He said if I start making him look foolish in front of clients, we will have a different conversation. There it was again, the calm phrasing, the implied shift. I didn't back down. I said I'm tired of absorbing everything quietly while he benefits from the image of a stable home. He asked if I wanted to renegotiate the arrangement. I told him if he expects flexibility, then so do I. He didn't argue. He said that's fair. He said we're adults. He said he assumed I wasn't interested in that option. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I said I'm considering it. He nodded. That should have made me feel empowered. It did. A few days later, I reached out to one of his competitors' wives. I mentioned, casually, that the travel schedule this year has been intense, that sometimes business trips blur lines. I didn't accuse, I suggested. Within a week, I heard from someone else that there's chatter about his distractions. Nothing formal, just murmurs. He noticed the shift faster than I expected. He asked if I'd been discussing our private life. I said I talked to friends. He said business reputations are fragile and that he won't tolerate sabotage. Sabotage. That word felt heavy. At the same time, I met with the attorney again. I asked what it would look like to move certain investments into my own name. She explained what is realistic and what would trigger resistance. I went home and told him we should review our estate planning jointly. He agreed to put one smaller property under a shared trust. He refused changes to business equity. He framed it as practicality. I'm not sure it is. I also did something I'm not proud of. I told my daughter she needs distance from Marie. I said Marie is inserting herself where she doesn't belong. I said if she wants a relationship with me, she needs to stop entertaining outside commentary about my marriage. My daughter looked at me and said, "You're asking me to choose comfort over honesty." I said, "I'm asking you to respect your mother. She hasn't called in 4 days. I thought asserting myself would restore balance. Instead, it feels like I've destabilized multiple fronts at once. He's more guarded now. I can sense recalculation. My daughter is distant. Marie has stopped contacting me entirely, and I'm sitting here wondering whether pushing back was strength or panic. I was tired of being the quiet one, tired of absorbing commentary and pretending the arrangement was entirely my design, so I acted. Now I'm not sure if I've protected myself or accelerated something I'm not fully prepared for. Follow-up. It's been 4 years since my last post. The divorce is final. It's been final for a while. There were depositions, valuations, negotiations, spreadsheets. I walked away with what was legally mine and a little more than some people expected, a little less than others assumed. The boutique is fully mine. The shared property was divided. I don't rely on him anymore. For anyone who thought I stayed for a payout, that theory didn't age well. I didn't scorch the earth. I didn't expose him publicly. I didn't drag every affair into the light. And no, I didn't walk away empty-handed either. The marriage ended because the balance tipped, slowly at first, then decisively. After the period I wrote about before, I started moving money, carefully, within my rights. I transferred profits from the boutique into a separate investment account under my name only. It was clean, documented, not hidden, he noticed. He didn't accuse me of stealing. He simply mirrored the action. Future distributions from his business tightened. What used to feel shared started looking segmented. It stopped feeling like a marriage and started looking like parallel corporations. Around that same time, I made another mistake. I spoke to someone on his board. I framed it as concern about optics, about how personal distractions could ripple into investor confidence. I never said the word affair. I didn't need to. That conversation made its way back to him within days. He asked me directly if I intended to undermine him professionally. I said I intended to protect my interests. That was the first time he said, clearly, that if I positioned myself against him publicly, he would treat me as opposition rather than partner. It sounds cold. It was. We lasted another year like that. Separate bedrooms, joint appearances, financial disentangling disguised as planning. I thought I was being strategic. In reality, we were already dissolving. The final break wasn't explosive. It was paperwork he filed, not because of infidelity. The filing cited irreconcilable differences and financial incompatibility. I didn't fight the filing, I fought the terms, and I did well. The prenup held, but it wasn't as airtight as people think. Appreciation on certain joint assets counted. My attorney was better than I expected. I didn't get half his empire. I didn't expect to. I secured the boutique, 2 properties, and a settlement that allows me to operate independently without scraping. His business took a hit during the divorce. Not because I exposed him, because rumors were already circulating from previous years. Investors don't love instability. A few partnerships dissolved. Nothing catastrophic. He restructured. He survived. He's now openly dating one of the women. Not the one who messaged me. A different one, younger, polished. She attends events with him. No secrecy now, I've seen photos. It doesn't sting the way people expect it to. What stings is something else. My daughter went no contact with him shortly after the divorce. That was her choice. She said she couldn't reconcile his behavior with the image he projected. He tried reaching out. She didn't respond. With me, it's different. We speak. Not daily. Not intimately. It's measured. She visits on holidays. We don't discuss her father unless necessary. She doesn't ask about my dating life. I don't ask about her opinions of the past. There's space between us. I accept that. People assume I must be angry or vindicated. I'm neither. I don't feel triumphant. I also don't feel destroyed. I feel recalibrated. The social fallout was subtle. A few invitations stopped coming. Some women I thought were allies distanced themselves. Others leaned in. Wealthy circles are pragmatic. They care more about disruption than morality. I didn't give them a spectacle, so they moved on. Marie never did. I reached out to her once, 2 years after the divorce. A simple message: I hope you're well. She responded politely, distant. She said she was glad I was stable, but that she couldn't step back into a friendship where she felt dismissed and indirectly harmed. She didn't elaborate, but I knew what she meant. When I told my ex about her confrontation years ago, her career shifted. I never apologized for that directly. I told myself it wasn't my doing. She doesn't see it that way. I've considered writing a fuller apology. I haven't. As for me, I dated briefly, nothing serious. I learned quickly that I don't crave chaos or conquest. I crave predictability, and I'm honest about that now. One thing I will clarify, because strangers like simple narratives: I am not a gold digger. If I were, I would have stayed longer and quieter. I escalated. I moved money. I pressured. I challenged. That cost me comfort. I stayed originally because I equated stability with safety. I escalated because I refused to be decorative. The divorce forced a version of clarity I avoided for years. Not moral clarity, structural clarity. I now know exactly what is mine, exactly what I earn, exactly what I stand on. I don't monitor him. I don't ask about his girlfriend. I don't attend events where he'll be present unless unavoidable. When we cross paths socially, we are civil. Brief. He looks the same, confident, managed. What's different is that I no longer feel like I'm negotiating from inside his world. I built something separate. My daughter told me recently that she respects that I didn't crumble. She also told me she still struggles with the years I tolerated things she would never accept. I didn't defend myself. I didn't justify. I told her she's allowed to build her life differently. That's as close as we've come to repair. Marie and I are unlikely to reconcile. She's still in the hotel industry. She advanced eventually, without my ex's network. I heard that through someone else. She doesn't need my friendship. That stings in a way I didn't anticipate. Looking back, I see that I wasn't protecting love. I was protecting infrastructure. And when the infrastructure became contested, I fought like a business partner, not a spouse. Some people think I should have burned everything down publicly. Others think I should have kept absorbing quietly. I did neither. I escalated strategically, and the marriage ended accordingly. I'm not devastated. I'm not glowing. I'm stable. My daughter and I have a cautious relationship. My ex thrives enough. His new partner knows what she signed up for, I assume, and I'm alone in a house that is fully mine. That isn't poetic. It isn't tragic. It's the outcome of choices made slowly, deliberately, and sometimes arrogantly. If there's a lesson, it isn't about cheating. It's about understanding what you're really protecting and whether the protection eventually turns into competition. I competed, he filed, and now we're two separate entities with a shared history and no shared leverage. That's where things stand.